Welcome to Tino's Time. And on this episode, we are going to recap Week 7 by Mageddon of the NFL fantasy season. And then we're going to get you ready and we're going to preview Week 8 and we're going to set your lineups and we're going to make sure you win and we're just going to make sure we keep going on this roll because it's already Week 8 and we're almost halfway through the football season. We would be halfway through, but remember they added one more game and the season is now 17-game season. So we have an extra week, and I love an extra week of football. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's recap everything that went down and by Mageddon Week 7 of the NFL fantasy football season. I just mentioned it. We got through by Mageddon, people. We did it. Yes. And if you're able to get out with victories like I were, thank God and lucky for you. But if you weren't, it's okay. It's only 1 week. We're going to get back to it and we're going to do our thing. On Sunday, it was National Tight End Day, and what a day it was for all the tight ends in the NFL. We saw about 7+ tight ends get a touchdown, and every single tight end, the tight ends that have been sucking, Robert Tanyan had a good day. We saw guys like Mark Hollins from the Miami Dolphins have a good day. We saw so many tight ends get a touchdown, it was ridiculous. But it was also a weird day. The first touchdown of the day thrown was by the Patriots wide receiver Kendrick Bourne. The second touchdown thrown was by the MVP hopeful, the Titans running back Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry wants to be in that MVP race, and it seems quarterbacks only win the MVP. So now that he threw a touchdown, does that count? Derrick Henry is going to be in the MVP race, and he might just win it with that touchdown. Week 7 was crazy and wild, and now let's get into the injuries that happened and all the injuries that happened on Sunday. You know, there weren't like too many like crazy injuries, but there were a few that were kind of like awful. We saw Zach Wilson of the New York Jets go out and he sprained his PCL and he will be out probably 2 to 4 weeks. And we saw on Monday, we'll talk about it in a minute when we talk about the Monday night game and we talk about the headlines and everything that happened. The Jets went out and traded for Joe Flacco from the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw last Thursday Nick Chubb missed the game, and it seems like he will be back this upcoming week. So if you have D'Ernest Johnson and you were lucky enough to start him, unlike I did, and I don't know why I didn't. I had the Broncos in another league. I thought it would work, but it didn't. I don't want to talk about it, but I was lucky enough to get out with the win. But if you're able to start D'Ernest Johnson and use that 23 points that he got, good for you. But it looks like Chubb will be back this week, and it's kind of sucks because, we also saw Josh Jacobs. He got hurt with a chest injury, and it looks like, he doesn't seem like he's going to be we don't know what's going to happen with Josh Jacobs. Milo Sanders from the Philadelphia Eagles, he is hurt with an ankle injury, and I'm going to give you the running back that is the backup that had a really good game, Kenneth Gainwell, that you should go out and pick up once we get to the waiver wires. Devonte Parker, he missed the game with a hamstring injury, and Jalen Waddle continues to thrive in that offense. Antonio Brown missed the game with the Chicago Bears versus the Chicago Bears for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that didn't seem to matter because Mike Evans caught all the touchdowns, but AB missed the game with an ankle injury. T.Y. Hilton has a quad injury, and we don't know. Hopefully T.Y. can get back, but we'll have to see. Now the biggest injury going into Week 8, Devonte Adams yesterday announced that he has tested positive for COVID. And with the Green Bay Packers playing on Thursday night, it's one of those things that we don't know if he's going to play. So if you have Devonte Adams, I would definitely consider going out and getting Allen Lazard because he is the guy that thrived the most other than Adams on Sunday. And if Adams is out, Aaron Rodgers needs somebody to throw to, and also a guy that had another good game we'll be talking about in the starts and sits later on, Robert Tanyan. He finally had a breakout game, and the 2 games that Devonte Adams missed last season, Robert Tanyan had 10+ fantasy points, and he was the one that benefited the most. So if Devonte Adams is out, and you were lucky enough to hold on to Robert Tanyan, I would definitely consider starting him if you have a guy like Darren Waller. He was out. He has a groin injury and multiple injuries, and we don't know what he's going to be back. Hopefully he's back. The Raiders are on a bye this week, so hopefully this bye gives him a week to get healthy and come back in week 9. So hopefully Darren Waller can be healthy going down the stretch. Now that we talked about all the injuries, let's get into that Monday night game. We talked about it. It was the Seattle Seahawks versus the New Orleans Saints. This was a game I talked about in my bold predictions last week. I thought maybe they were going to ball out and go for 80 points. There were many people that, like I told you, to sit in this game, like Tyler Lockett. It was just, it was one of those games that, like, I was expecting more, and it really was not a good Monday night game. The final score was only 13-10. The Saints ended up winning, and the guy that honestly was the only one that seemed to really perform in most of this game, to be honest, like consistently, was Alvin Kamara. He had 51 yards rushing. He had 10 receptions for 128 yards, and he also got a touchdown. Alvin Kamara did his thing, and he proved that why he's one of the best running backs in the league, and it seemed like Jameis Winston was only throwing it to him. Jameis Winston didn't have an awful day, but he didn't put up the numbers that we expected with Seattle's defense that isn't very good, or that wasn't supposed to be very good. DK Metcalf only had one big catch, and then he had one reception and the rest of the game, and that was it. He finished the game with 96 yards and a touchdown, but if he didn't get that long gain for the touchdown, it wouldn't have been a very good game for DK Metcalf. Speaking of guys that didn't have a very good game, Tyler Lockett is just somebody right now, people, I cannot trust him while Geno Smith is the quarterback. He's one of those guys, he's going to be fine once Russell comes back, but until then, he is somebody that I would really consider sitting and just putting on your bench, because there's so many receivers that you could trust right now, and Tyler Lockett is one of those guys. With Geno Smith, he is just not getting going. Alex Collins was a guy everybody was hyped up to start. Rashad Penny was also a guy we didn't know if Alex Collins was going to play. It was one of those things you didn't know who was going to be the running back for the Seattle Seahawks. And Alex Collins didn't have a good game at all. He had 35 yards, 1 reception, and 9 yards. And that isn't going to do it for a guy that we were trusting on Monday night. And, like I said, this Monday night game was just nothing that I thought. And it wasn't good at all, in my opinion. They could have put a better game on, but if Russell was there, and it was not a very good game. So hopefully, if you're able to squeak by and get through it, and if you had the people like DK, and if you had Alvin Kamara scored 30 plus fantasy points, so he probably helped you win you your week, depending on how many points you were down. He just put on a show. But other than that, there wasn't really much to talk about in this Monday night game. Like I talked about earlier, Joe Flacco, earlier on Monday morning, afternoon, and during like lunchtime, it was around like 4 or 5 o'clock actually, he was traded to the Jets from the Philadelphia Eagles. Joe Flacco, we know him as the quarterback from the Baltimore Ravens. We know, he did his thing there. He went to the Eagles. He's been, on the Broncos. He's been kind of all over the place. But now he goes over to the Jets, and now he takes over for the Zach Wilson-less Jets. And, this definitely, in my opinion, benefits like Corey Davis and maybe Jamison Crowder a little bit. I'm sure Michael Carter will still be involved. But it's still one of those things I'm not going to go rush out and pick up Joe Flacco and be like, heck yeah, I'm going to start Joe Flacco. That's just not how I'm feeling. But now that we talked about the Jets and we talked about all that, let's keep that on the down low, and let's talk about the guys that if you started them and Mageddon because you had no one else to start, they straight up cost you your weeks, and it was just not okay. Let's talk about the tight ends first. Mark Andrews, he only put up 7.6 points, and obviously he didn't cost you your week, but he compared to what he's been putting up recently, those aren't the numbers that we were expecting from a guy that was putting up 10 plus fantasy points in the last 2-3 weeks. Noah Fant on Thursday night, he only had 8.9 points, and that game was another game that it was the Dearness Johnson show, and there was nothing else going on. Noah Fant, I'm sure he'll be okay. OJ Howard, though, I talked about it last week in my show. The Bears are really good versus tight ends, and it just doesn't seem like the Bears give up fantasy points to tight ends. So that's a stat that you need to watch, because OJ Howard only had 1.9 points, and that ain't going to do it. And, even though the Bears got demolished and Tom Brady put on a show, OJ Howard definitely didn't benefit from that. We'll talk about the guy in Studs of the Week and Sunday Showdowns and everything in a minute that just benefited the most. The wide receivers that struggled, Brandon Cooks had 7.1 points. Jacoby Myers can't seem to find the end zone. He had 9.4 points. I'm sorry about that. Julio Jones had 5.8 points, and it looks like A.J. Brown is back. Derrick Henry's the bad man. He does his thing up and down. He's throwing touchdowns, trying to get in the MVP race. And Julio Jones just cannot stay healthy. He can't stay on the field. And it's just one of those things. Another guy that just continues to suck it up this season, Allen Robinson, only at 3.5 points. And with Justin Fields, it just doesn't seem like they have the same connection. And as much as I love Allen Robinson, A-Rob, as a Chicago Bears fan, I just don't know if I could start him in fantasy, and I don't know what's going on with the Bears. I don't know what's going to happen with all that. But right now, Allen Robinson is just not doing what we want him to do. Darrell Williams, I don't know why I was thinking about the Bears. Darrell Williams from the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs looked awful on Sunday. They looked like the team. They looked like the Jets. We didn't know what they were doing. It did not look like the Kansas City Chiefs that we knew. They were lost. And Darrell Williams only had 8 points, and that just ain't going to do it for a guy that we thought was going to have a better game. Joe Mixon had 11.8 points, and for Joe Mixon, that's not really good. I mean, he should be putting up more points, especially for a guy you probably drafted in the first or second round. Antonio Gibson, he had 7.6 points, and he's another guy that has been struggling. He's been injured and this and that, and he's just one of those things that is just, I'm sorry, Antonio Gibson, I just don't know if I can trust you right now. A.J. Dillon, though, this one is my bad. I'm sorry. We'll talk about it in a little bit when we get to humble brag and my bad. A.J. Dillon at negative 0.2 points. So I'm sorry, everybody, that I told to start him. I thought he was going to have a better game, but it just didn't seem like he was getting involved. And Aaron Jones didn't have a great game, but he had a decent game. And, yeah. So I don't know how I would feel about A.J. Dillon, but now that we got through Mageddon, hopefully all your starters came back. You got Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, James Robinson, Austin Eckler. Hopefully you don't have to start A.J. Dillon, and you keep him on the bench, and hopefully, later down the road, later in the season, he'll be more beneficial in fantasy. Chuba Hubbard at 9.8 points, and he's another guy. The Panthers' offense just looks awful. Sam Darnold looks like he went back in time and went back to the New York Jets. What happened, Sam Darnold? We thought you were back and you were doing good. You were fantasy relevant. And I don't know, but Chuba Hubbard isn't doing what we wanted him to do. Milo Sanders had 3.7 points, and he's a guy that got hurt. And I talked about Kenneth Gainwell a little bit ago. We'll talk about him more as the show goes on, but he's a guy you need to pick up because it looks like Miles Sanders might be out this upcoming week, and we'll have to see. Keep an eye on that on the injury report. But he's just somebody that I just don't know if I can really trust. Now, let's talk about two quarterbacks that were straight up disappointments this week, and two I don't know what to do with. The first one, we talked about it a little bit earlier. We talked about it with Chuba Hubbard. Sam Darnold is just not what he was the first 3 weeks of the season. The first 3 weeks of the season, he was feeling good. He was throwing bombs left and right, and now he looks like he went back in time and went back to the Jets, and it's not feeling real good. He got 4 points this past week, and with Mageddon and all those quarterbacks missing, it was not very helpful. And Sam, you have a good matchup this week versus Atlanta, but I just don't know if I can trust you. Patrick Mahomes, though, people, let's talk about this guy for a second, because he has so many interceptions, it's ridiculous. He turns the ball over left and right, and he looks like a quarterback that was running around with his chicken with his head cut off, and he doesn't know what to do. He got 12 fantasy points in some leagues, and I know in other leagues, depending on your scoring, he got about 10 to 8 points. And for a guy that we drafted very, very high, and for a guy that just wasn't everything that we thought, and we thought him and Tyreek Hill were going to go out and do their thing, and we thought they were going to have a really good season. And right now, Patrick Mahomes is a guy that, you might have to sit if you have a better option, like a Justin Herbert, if you were able to get somebody off the waiver wire, and I don't know, he has a good matchup this week versus the Giants on Monday night. We'll talk about it later on, But Patrick Mahomes is just somebody that is just, he's just not what he was. And it's sad because Patrick Mahomes is a guy that we were relying on so much. And after the phenomenal seasons that he's had and all the numbers he's put up fantasy-wise and in regular fantasy football, it just sucks to watch him have this. And maybe the Bears are right. No, I'm just kidding. The Bears are wrong. They should have took Patrick Mahomes. But now, let's talk about all the guys that actually helped us win our week and the studs and the guys that were just straight up dogs and just were awesome. And we're happy we drafted them because they're putting up numbers every week and they're helping us win. Let's talk about Cooper Kupp. He scored the most fantasy points in all of the NFL this year. He's putting up 20-plus fantasy points every single week. Him and Matthew Stadford just seem to get better and better every single week, and it's just ridiculous. He had 10 receptions, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 37.6 fantasy points. Jamal Chase, he couldn't catch the ball in preseason, and everybody was worried about drafting him, and now this guy is the best wide receiver rookie right now in the NFL. He put up 8 receptions, 201 yards. Yes, I said that, 201 yards, and 1 touchdown. He put up 34.1 points, and if you were able to draft him and you were feeling good and you were worried about him, you're probably really happy right now. And like me, I traded for him, and I'm feeling good right now. Joe Burrow, the guy that throws him the ball, had 416 yards, 200 of which went to Jamal. He had 3 touchdowns. He threw 1 interception, but he finished with 41.96 fantasy points. And for Joe Burrow, a guy you probably drafted way later on as your backup, and now he's putting up numbers like this. And if you were able to stack him and Jamal Chase, that's ridiculous. And they put up 75 points just combined. That's awesome. Speaking of a guy that just continues to catch the ball and is like Alvin Kamara's twin, or he's just like Alvin and he does his thing. DeAndre Swift, he had 48 rushing yards, 8 receptions, 96 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. He put up 28.4 fantasy points, and DeAndre Swift is doing his thing, and thank God he's healthy every week, even though he's questionable every week. I'm just happy he's out there because he's putting up numbers, especially in BPR leagues. Let's talk about the ex-quarterback for the Lions, Matthew Stadford. We talked about Cooper Kupp, and Matthew Stadford continues to do his thing. He put up 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 39.84 fantasy points. And with Armageddon, if you had Josh Allen like one of my friends did, and he had Matthew Stadford as his backup, he put up huge numbers, and it was just ridiculous. We talked about a guy that wasn't really good in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, O.J. Howard, but let's talk about the guy that caught pretty much all of Brady's touchdowns and just had a phenomenal game. Mike Evans had 6 receptions, 76 yards, but he put up 3 touchdowns and finished with 31.6 fantasy points. And that's good and everything, but I don't want everybody freaking out and being like, oh my God, Mike Evans is going to be the best wide receiver in the league. But you got to remember, Antonio Brown was out, Rob Gronkowski was out. Once those guys come back, Mike Evans will kind of slide. But if you're able to start him, especially on Armageddon week, where everybody seemed to be starting guys left and right, then nobody knew who their names were and just were hoping for the best. If you had Mike Evans, you were feeling good. Damien Harris from the New England Patriots put on a show. He had 106 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions, 7 yards receiving, and 25.3 fantasy points. Damien Harris is a guy for the New England Patriots. Another my bad. I told you to start Stevenson from the Patriots last week. I thought he was going to be good. He was a top waiver wire pickup of mine, but he just wasn't what we thought he was going to be, and that's okay. But if you do have Damien Harris, you're feeling good. A.J. Brown, though, we talked about it with Julio Jones. A.J. Brown is back, and welcome to fantasy football. He had 8 receptions, 133 yards, and 1 touchdown. 27.3 fantasy points, and it looks like we can trust A.J. Brown again, and I'm down for it. Now let's talk about, this one is kind of like, not like, this is one that was very surprising, and we thought we wanted to start the team that was facing them, but the New York Giants went out and made Sam Darnold, like we talked about in the disappointments, they made him look like he was on the Jets, and they just did phenomenal things. And for some reason, if you're able to start the Giants in the league, in a 2-defense league, or if you just took a chance, and they put up 17 fantasy points, and for a defense that just has not been very good the last years and last long time, and they haven't been good since they were in the Super Bowl, and they just, they're just not what they used to be. Them putting up 17 points in a Bye-Mageddon week, I'll take it all day long. And the last one, last stud of the week, the best performance, doing his thing, Tom Brady, the GOAT. Tom Brady just is ridiculous. This man is getting younger as years go on. He ain't getting older. He put up 211 yards, but he threw 4 touchdowns, and he put up 36.66 points. That was also, he threw a 600 touchdown to Mike Evans, and Mike Evans actually gave it to a fan on accident, and it looked like a Buccaneers staff member had to go and talk to the guy. The guy ended up getting a game football, $1,000 to the Buccaneers store, and then a signed jersey. They didn't say what jersey that was, but it better have been Tom Brady at least, because that's what I would have wanted, because that's not my fault Mike Evans gave me the football. I would have kept that all day long. But Tom Brady never ages, so congratulations to Tom Brady on getting your 600 touchdown and proving that your man is stealing. You're going to be playing in the NFL for a very long time. But now that we talked about all the guys that helped you win your week and all the studs and all the guys that just put on for great performances, let's take a little bit of a moment, and your boy Tino is going to do a little bit of a humble brag and my bad. And let's start off with the my bads. I talked about it earlier in the disappointments. My bad. I told you to start A.J. Dillon. I thought A.J. Dillon was going to do his thing, but he did absolutely nothing. He put up negative 0.02 points, and that just isn't going to do it. Also, Ramon Stevenson from the New England Patriots, I talked about him. He didn't even play. He was a healthy scratch, and J.J. Hardy and, all these guys got a bunch of touches and a bunch of touchdowns. Brandon Bolden, a guy that we haven't seen in years, he got all the touchdowns, and I'm sorry. So if you started Stevenson and he didn't play on Sunday morning, hopefully you didn't listen to me on that one. I told you to start many guys. I told you to sit many guys that went off. I'm sorry. I told you to sit Robert Tanyan. He went off for 16 points. Of course, the 1 week everybody thinks that he's not going to do anything. He does anything. I told you to start or sit CJ Uzomah because I thought that the Ravens defense was going to do better. And I actually went back on this on my own advice, and I had him in one league, and at the end of Sunday morning, right before the game started, I put CJ in instead of Gerald Everett, and that honestly helped me, put me over the top and helped me win, because CJ got 24 and Gerald Everett only got 4 or 5 points. And CJ Uzomah has honestly become one of those fantasy tight ends that you can trust right now, especially with Darren Waller out. George Kittle ain't coming back anytime soon, it seems. There's just so many injuries, so many tight ends that you can't trust. If you're able to keep CJ, you're doing your thing, and I'm sorry if you didn't start him like I told you to, but hopefully you didn't listen to me and you did your thing. I also told you to sit Ryan Tannehill, Michael Carter. There were just many guys that I told you to sit last week that just went off, and I'm sorry. Joe Burrow, we talked about him, 30 plus fantasy points. Michael Carter, 16 points. There were so many guys that went off, and I'm sorry. It was Bye-Mageddon week. Of course, I should have known all these guys would have went off. So I'm sorry. But now, let's do a little bit of a humble brag. D'Ernest Johnson, he went off on Thursday night last week versus the Broncos, and it was his night. He had 23 fantasy points, 100 plus yards rushing, a touchdown, and he just did his thing. And I didn't start him in one league because I'm a dodo, and I didn't listen to myself again, which I don't know why I always go back on. I just need to continue to listen to myself and remember that I know what I'm doing. And yeah, it just irritating because I would have had 23 plus fantasy points more. Most of the starts and streams I did well. I told you to stream and start Matthew Stadford, of course, in the revenge game. Jalen Waddle was one of my top flex options last week. I told you to start him. He put up 15 points. Khalil Herbert was another guy I told you to stream last week. Matt Ryan, another one. Honestly, Matt Ryan is honestly a start every single week for me now. AJ Green was another one. He continues to come back and looks like he was the guy with Andy Dalton on the Bengals, and he's having great things with Kyle Murray. But the biggest humble brag, if you did not watch NFL Fantasy Football Live yesterday, they do this thing, and it's called hashtag that helps no one, and they do it, and whoever scores touchdown on Sundays that help absolutely no one, you got to tweet it in and tweet it in and tag everybody in it, and they might show you on the show. So on Sunday, They did it. I saw a touchdown. Boston Scott, he stole a touchdown from Milo Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, Jalen Hurts, all the guys that we started. And I was just like, you know what? Let's just try it. I was like, Jalen Hurts runs in for the touchdown. No, it's Boston Scott at NFL Fantasy Live, at Adam Rank, hashtag that helps no one. And on Monday, during the NFL Fantasy Show, go check out at Tino's Time 1996. At Tino's Time 10, your boy Tino was on the show and he was live. His tweet was live on the show, and it happened last year for one that happened with Kyle Juszczyk. But for me to continue to get out there and get this and get likes from Adam Rank and Kimmy Checks and Patrick Claiborne and all these guys is something that, you know, for a guy like me that hasn't really done and hasn't been a part of a lot and, you know, hasn't accomplished too much in his life yet, that's something really big for somebody like me. So I just want to do a little bit of a humble brag because you never know what could happen. So just take a chance on Sunday and do hashtag that helps no one, because you might be able to be on TV like your boy Tino was. And that was my humble brag and my bad. And now, before we start talking about week 8 and we get to talk about a couple, you know, everything that's going to go down in the next week, almost halfway through. I'm sorry, we got an extra week this season. I always forget. Let's talk about the 3 things that I learned about in week 7, and then let's get into week 8. The first thing that I learned in week 7, always look at the injury report to see who's in and out. Because on Thursday, in my opinion, in my fault, I didn't look at the injury report on Thursday to see Bradley Chubb was out. The Broncos had a lot of injuries on defense, and I thought that they had all those guys, and I didn't do the research and look on the injury report to see, because I probably would not have started the Denver Broncos defense if I would have known that, and then I would have started Dearness Johnson like I would have wanted to in my other league, and it just wouldn't have worked. It just wouldn't have worked out better for me, even though I got lucky enough to go 3-0 this week. It's just one of those things. Always look at the injury report. Patrick Mahomes might not be the starter we all thought he was in fantasy. I talked about it a little bit in my disappointments. We drafted him very high. He was one of those guys we wanted really bad. He was going to be the quarterback, put up 30-plus fantasy points every week, and it's just not happening. Joe Burrow's putting up more points. Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray. There's just so many other guys that you can start over him, and I mean, it's starting to become where Matt Ryan's putting up more points than him, and who would have thought that in the beginning of the season? I'm lucky enough to have Matt Ryan, but I wanted Patrick Mahomes. I thought Patrick Mahomes was going to do his thing. So I guess we just learned that Patrick Mahomes isn't the fantasy quarterback that we said he was. But I'm sure I'm going to say this in the next week. He's going to go off and have 7 touchdowns on Monday night. So we'll see what happens versus the Giants on Monday night. But right now, he's just not the starter that we thought he was. You need also, the last thing that I learned in week 7, you need to sit Tyler Lockett until Russell Wilson comes back. Don't drop him. Don't do anything stupid, but put him on your bench until Russell Wilson comes back. He's not getting the moves and he's not getting the things that we all thought he was going to do. Without Russell Wilson, Geno Smith continues to look at DK Metcalf and all the other people's way. I mean, there was other guys that were getting involved yesterday that I didn't even know who their names were. One guy's name was Swan, I think, Frankie Swan or Frandel Swan, or I forgot what his whole name was. But you need to sit Tyler Lockett until he comes back, until Russell Wilson comes back, because it's one of those things. I just cannot trust him, and it's just one of those things. So, yeah, I'm not starting Tyler Lockett until Russell Wilson gets back. And now that we've went over everything that happened in Week 7, Mageddon is over. Thank God. People, it was exhausting trying to set our lineups this week. 6 teams on a bye. It was ridiculous. I just needed to take a deep breath, and thank God we got through that. I was able to go 3-0. Hopefully, whatever types of league you were in, and you were, depending on what you were doing and everything, hopefully you were able to get through it and you were able to schedule. But if you weren't, at least it's only 1 week and it's over. And this week, there's only 2 teams on a bye. And let's get right into week 8 and let's get ready to set our lineups and do our thing. So, like I said, we got Mageddon was ridiculous. We saw 6 teams on a bye, but those 6 teams are back. And this week, there's only 2 teams on a bye. which is a lot better than having all those teams on a bye. But it is two big teams because we have the Baltimore Ravens, which are going to be missing Lamar Jackson, Hollywood Brown, Rashad Bateman, Latavius Murray, Mark Andrews, the Ravens defense, Justin Tucker, depending on what leagues you're in. We also have the Raiders. Derek Carr's been good. Darren Waller was out last week, but he's hopefully going to be back after the bye week. We have, Henry Ruggs. There's Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake. There are a lot of guys, but it's not as bad as it was last week. So don't you worry. If we can get through last week, we can definitely get through this week. So let's not waste any more time, and let's get into week 8, and let's start off like we always do, like we do to preview all the weeks. Let's start off with my bold predictions. My first bold prediction is Danny Dimes is going to throw 4 TDs on Monday Night Football. Danny Dimes is one of those guys we've wanted to start in the past. He's had good weeks, awful weeks, the weeks we tell you to sit him. He has good weeks, the week we tell you to start him. He has bad weeks. But with Lamar Jackson and Derek Carr being out, and especially in 2 quarterback leagues like I'm in, if you are in a 2 quarterback league, I would definitely consider starting Danny Dimes, especially because in leagues like that, it's very hard to find a quarterback this late in the season. And in my case, I have Sam Darnold, and I'm just not trusting him right now. But I'm sure Sam Darnold's going to go off and have a phenomenal game. But my bold prediction is Danny Dimes is going to go throw 4 touchdowns versus that Kansas City Chiefs defense, and Patrick Mahomes might have to play. And what if the Giants defense shows up like they did last week and they play good versus the Chiefs? That might be something we'll have to talk about next week. My second bold prediction, the Lions are going to defeat the Eagles. DeAndre Swift and Jared Goff are going to go off, and they're going to get their first W of the season, and Jalen Hurts and Milo Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell are going to be like, what just happened? We lost to the Lions. Now, my last bold prediction for week 8, and people are going to be like, you're crazy. What? This ain't happening. This guy's a fumbling turnover machine. Matt Nagy don't know what he's doing. The Bears are awful. But I'm telling you, this is Justin Fields' week. We're at home. We didn't have a very good week last week. Nobody is expecting anything. Justin Fields is going to come out and ball out versus the 49ers defense. I hope the Bears win. I'm not saying they're going to, but Justin Fields is going to go out. He's going to ball out, and he's going to show why the Bears traded up for him and why the Bears' future is so bright. So, again, in a 2 quarterback league, if you have to take a chance and a flyer, I would definitely consider starting Justin Fields, because you heard it here first from your boy Tino. He's going to go off, and he's going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And those are my bold predictions for week 8 and almost halfway through the fantasy football season. But now that we got into the bold prediction, let's start getting into guys that we need to pick up, we need to drop, we need to do, and just, everything that we always do. And let's start it off with the waiver wires, and then we're going to do something different this week. Instead of my top 5 flex options, we're going to do guys that you need to trade for and trade away, because depending on what type of league you're in, the trade deadline is coming up. It's around November 11th to 17th, right around there. So I'm going to tell you guys that you need to trade for and trade away. But before we get to that, let's get into my top 5 waiver wire pickups for week 8. Number 5, it's the Bengals defense versus the New York Jets. The Bengals defense have been really good this season, and now they get to go up against the Jets and Joe Flacco. And not that Joe Flacco isn't awful, and not saying that they can't compete, but he's going to a new team. He's got to get used to the regime and the guys, and Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder and everybody on the Jets and Michael Carter. And the Bengals defense has been really good. They're the top of the AFC right now. If the playoffs ended right now, they'd be the number 1 and they'd have a bye. Who would have thought that in the beginning of the season? Not this guy. But if you need a defense this week, go pick up the Bengals. Number 4, this one depends on Devonte Adams. It doesn't look like he's going to play. So if Devonte Adams doesn't play and you have him and you need a replacement, go pick up Allen Lazard. They play the Cardinals on Thursday night, and I think that game is going to be an absolute shootout, an absolute barn burner, and it's going to be fantasy points galore, and we'll talk about that game a lot in a little bit. So if Devonte Adams is out, I would definitely go pick up Allen Lazard, because Aaron Rodgers needs somebody to throw to, right? Number 3, Kenyon Drake, he's on a bye this week, and he's been really good since the Raiders switched coaches and kind of had that new coaching scheme, and he's gotten the end zone the last few weeks. And, especially on a bye week, if you're able to get a guy like Kenyon Drake and stash him for this week, if you don't, because, there's not many teams on a bye, so we can kind of afford to have a guy to pick up a guy that is on a bye. So pick up Kenyon Drake right now and feel good later on the season when he comes back. And the Raiders, Josh Jacobs, of course, is the starter, but Kenyon Drake has definitely been getting involved more. And you're going to always want those guys as Derrick Henry goes on a bye, Jonathan Taylor goes on a bye later on throughout the season. Number 2, I've been talking about this guy a lot the last few weeks. It's Rashad Bateman. He's another one that's on a bye this week. The Ravens are obviously on a bye. We talked about that earlier, but he's been getting better as the weeks went on. He's played 2 games this season, but if you listen to NFL Fantasy Live, if you listen to all the fantasy shows, you listen to your boy Tino, we've all said it, that he could be a number 1 wide receiver going into later in the season. And if you're able to get him and stash him, and if you're able to get him later on, if you picked him up and put him on the IR spot, you're going to feel real good later on throughout the season, especially in the playoffs. If you could have a Rashad Bateman that's putting up 20 plus points in the playoffs, you're going to feel real good, especially because he'll be a flex option if you drafted right. My number 1 waiver wire pickup for week 8 is Kenneth Gainwell. We talked about Kenneth Gainwell a little bit. He had a really good game. He did his thing. And it looks like we talked about with Milo Sanders, I don't know if he's going to be back, and I don't know what's going to happen with him. But if you need a running back this week, especially if you're going to be missing Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, or if you're just having running back injuries, or you just didn't draft a running back at all, go pick up Kenneth Gainwell and feel good to start him this week versus the Lions, because the Lions are also giving up a lot of points to running backs, and they're just not really good. And I talked about in the bold predictions, the Lions might win this game, but that doesn't mean Kenneth Gainwell can't get a lot of fantasy points. But now, the next thing I want to talk about, let's take a minute, let's take a deep breath, let's just... I'm going to do a little bit of a Ric Flair and get it all out. But now, let's do something different like I talked about. I usually do my top 5 flex options of the week after we do my waiver wire pickups. But this week, it's the meat of the fantasy football season. We're almost halfway through. The trade deadline is close approaching, depending on when your commissioner sets the trade deadline date. And in my league, I think it's like November 17th or the 24th. And you're going to want to get these guys and trade these guys away if they have a good playoff matchups. If they have, you always got to look farther ahead. So top 5 guys you need to trade for. Number 5, Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle has been phenomenal these last few weeks, and I think he's only going to get better as the weeks go on and as the season goes on, and especially if Devontae Parker continues to have this injury, Waddle is going to be that number 1 receiver, so go out and trade for him. Jonathan Taylor, you might have to give up a lot for Jonathan Taylor, but if you need a running back really bad, I would definitely go out and try to get him. He's had really good numbers, and, maybe you could say, Nyheim Hines is out there, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. But if you need a running back, I would definitely consider trying to get Jonathan Taylor. Like I said, you might have to give up something, but he would definitely be worth it. I'm not trading him away in one of my leagues, but if you don't have him, I would definitely trade for him. Cordell Patterson, he's obviously surpassed Mike Davis. He's out-touched Mike Davis 16-4 this past Sunday. And Cordell Patterson just continues to do work on the Atlanta Falcons offense. And it frustrates me to watch it as a Bears fan because this is what I wanted him to do. But at least he's getting his opportunity in Atlanta. So trade for Cordell Patterson and feel good because it looks like he's going to continue his streak and his run. Number 2 to trade for, Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy's been on the injured list. He's been out for a while. But once this man comes back, he's going to be Teddy Bridgewater's number 1 receiver, and he's going to come back and have phenomenal things. And we still have bye weeks coming up, and just, go out and get Jerry Jeudy right now if he's sitting on your waiver wire. I don't know why anybody would have Jerry Jeudy on their waiver wire, but go out and get him. Tyler Lockett, number 1. I've talked about him, and I told you to sit him until Russell Wilson comes back. And that's why you need to trade for him, because everybody's like, Tyler Lockett ain't doing nothing. Tyler Lockett is booty. Tyler Lockett is this and that. But if you're able to give up somebody that isn't so good, and Tyler Lockett stays not doing his thing, and you could sit him, like I said, But once Russell Wilson comes back and Tyler Lockett starts catching those deep passes again, and you have Tyler Lockett on your team, you're going to be like, heck yeah, I'm feeling real good, and you're sorry because you didn't trade for him. But if you do and you listen to your boy Tino, you're going to feel real good. So trade for Tyler Lockett now. Now, let's talk about the guys you need to trade away and for the guys that you could trade for. Number 5, Mike Evans. He just had a phenomenal 3-touchdown game. But like I mentioned, Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski will be back eventually. And Mike Evans will just be pushed to the side again. So sell high on him, especially after his 3-touchdown week versus the Chicago Bears. Adam Thielen, he's another one. He's had really good games, and he's just one of those that has ups and downs. And he's just somebody that I personally cannot trust. But if you could definitely trade for somebody that you want, maybe you're not very good at tight end or running back, whatever you may be whatever you're struggling at, trade Adam Thielen away and go get something that you could get, especially if you're not very deep in that position. Number 3, Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert has been doing this thing the last 2 weeks when Damien Williams was on the injured list and the COVID list, and even Damien Williams was back this past week, and Khalil Herbert still put up 10 plus fantasy points, and he's doing his thing and he's feeling good. So if you want to trade him away because you're worried that maybe this won't continue, I would definitely consider doing that to up a position that you have. Number 2, Robert Tanyan. This is a guy that I just cannot trust at all. This man has he's caught 2 games and he's had 2 touchdowns. And it was National Tight End Day, and maybe that had something to do with it. But unless Devonte Adams is out this week, I am not starting Robert Tanyan for the life of me. I cannot trust this guy, and I'm going to talk about him in my starts and sits. And I'm starting him this week if Devonte Adams is out. But it's one of those things that he could have a great game, or he could put up a dud, and it's just on Thursday night if he puts up a dud and I have to look at that for 5 days because Robert Tanyan screwed me again, I'm going to cry and I'm going to be real sad. My number 1 player to trade away for halfway through the fantasy season and the meat, almost halfway through. I'm sorry, I always forget there's only 1 more week. I'm so excited. 1 more week of football, fantasy football. It's beautiful. But my number 1 guy to trade away, and this might be surprising, but it's Patrick Mahomes. Guys, quarterback position is so deep where you could have somebody like a Joe Burrow. Kirk Cousins is putting on more fantasy points, and Patrick Mahomes, just based off of name value alone, you could get a running back 2, a wide receiver 2, and if you're struggling at those 2 positions, I would definitely consider going to trade Patrick Mahomes. Just try to trade him to somebody, be like, he's Patrick Mahomes, he's got Travis Kelce, he's got Hill, he's going to be fine, he's going to do his thing. But if you can get 2 positions that you're in desperate need of for one guy that may come back or may not, like fantasy wise, and if you have like a Joe Burrow, or if you have, a Matthew Stadford, if you were lucky enough to get somebody that is a better guy and has been putting up fantasy points, Tom Brady has been putting up better fantasy points. There's so many guys that are putting up better fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes. I would definitely think about trading him away, and that's just my opinion. And he might come back and he might do his thing and he might be able to be the guy that we all want him to be, but until then, it's just one of those things, and like I said, it would be definitely beneficial for people to do it. But now, let's get in, and we're going to start talking about the guys that you need to start, sit, and stream for Week 8. At least we don't have Buymageddon this week, and there's a bunch of more teams playing, except the Ravens and Raiders. And let's not waste any more time, and let's get into the starts and sits for Week 8. My start at quarterbacks this week is Joe Burrow versus the Jets. Joe Burrow has been doing his thing all season long, and he's going to continue that versus the Jets. Tom Brady, he is man of not aging. He looks like he's going to be playing fantasy, and he's going to be playing real football until he's 60 years old. He's facing the Saints, and honestly, I would start Tom Brady every single week, no matter the matchup. But, the Saints looked good versus Geno Smith, but Tom Brady's going to feast on them on Sunday. The running backs that you need to start this week is Kenneth Gainwell versus the Lions. We talked about him, number 1 waiver wire pickup, facing the Lions defense that is just straight up booty versus the run. So start Kenneth Gainwell. Khalil Herbert versus the 49ers. I talked about it, to trade away, and a guy that, maybe might not continue to put up the high numbers that he is, but With the versus the 49ers, we saw what Jonathan Taylor did last week, and I think Khalil Herbert is definitely going to be more beneficial as the weeks go on. And like I said, that's why I would definitely trade him away, especially if you need a position. I would start him this week, though. The wide receivers this week that you need to start: Robbie Woods versus the Texans. That Texans defense is awful. We saw what the Cardinals did, and I think the Rams are going to do the same thing. So start all your Rams, but start Robbie Woods, and obviously, you're going to start Cooper Kupp and everything, but I think Robbie Woods is going to have a good game. Allen Lazard, I just talked about him in the waiver wire pickups. He's another one. If Devonte Adams is out, I would definitely consider starting Allen Lazard. But if somehow Devonte Adams plays, I would still consider it, but I would just not feel as high on Allen if Adams does play. Another guy, if Adams does not play, Robert Tanyan. I talked about him, how I don't trust him, how I want to trade him away. But if Devonte Adams is out, we talked about it earlier, what he did in the 2 games with Devonte Adams out last season. And I think if Devonte Adams does not play, Robert Tanyan could definitely be a beneficial guy to start, because, he's really good, and especially if you have Darren Waller or Mark Andrews, George Kittle, there's some really big tight ends missing right now, and it's a desperate need at that position. A tight end that you need to start also, CJ Uzomah. I told you to sit him last week, and he goes off for 24 points, and now he gets to go up against the Jets, and honestly, I just see this game being very high scoring for the Bengals and not very much for the Jets. And, yes, they might get out to a very high scoring lead very fast, but that doesn't mean CJ, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, everybody can eat in the Bengals. The defense that you need to start this week, I talked about it in the bold predictions, how Justin Herbert might go off versus the 49ers. But then again, we saw what the Buccaneers did, and the Buccaneers are a really good defense, and the 49ers aren't the same defense that they used to be and everything. But the way Justin Fields has looked, if you need a defense this week, as much as I hate to say this, you need to start the 49ers, especially if the Bears continue to turn the ball over. I hope it doesn't happen, and I don't want to go against my Chicago Bears, but the 49ers just could feast, and you'll be real sad if you sit them. And, I don't know which way that game's going to go. It could go real good. It could go real bad. But I would definitely consider starting the 49ers this week. Now, let's get to the sits of the week. Tua Tagovailoa is going to face against the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are coming off their bye. They're feeling good. They're going to be doing their thing. And I just cannot trust Tua Tagovailoa this week versus the Bills when there are so many quarterbacks that you can trust, especially in 1 quarterback leagues. And if you are in 2 quarterback leagues, maybe you start them, but I'm just not. Jameis Winston versus the Bucks. Did you see what the Buccaneers defense did to the Chicago Bears? I just talked about what the 49ers could do, but the Buccaneers just demolished Justin Fields, and honestly, Jameis Winston might just go out there in a revenge game, and he might put on a show, but he also might just prove why the Buccaneers got rid of him and throw 30 interceptions in 1 game. Who knows? But don't start Jameis Winston this week. Myles Gaskin is another guy. He's going up against the Bills. I talked about Tua, and Myles Gaskin might be better in PPR leagues, but in standard leagues and stuff like that, I'm definitely staying away from Myles Gaskin. Now this guy, Elijah Mitchell, he goes off in the first series on Sunday night, and then he just disappears, and he doesn't have as big as a game if he would have continued to run the ball like he was in that first drive. And Elijah Mitchell going up against the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears still have a really good run defense. It depends, honestly, though. If Hakeem Hicks is in and playing, I would definitely sit him. But if Hakeem Hicks is out and you need a running back, I would start him. But it just depends on that injury report. So again, like I talked about, the 3 things that I learned, go and look at the injury report and see who's in and who's out. The 2 wide receivers I'm sitting this week, Adam Thielen versus the Cowboys. I told you earlier, I talked about him. I just feel like Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson have a better connection. And not that I don't like Adam Thielen, I just don't know if I can trust him consistently. And it looks like he might go up against Trevon Diggs. And Trevon Diggs is a baller. And I didn't know he was Stephon Diggs' brother until a couple weeks ago. I was yesterday's years old, I guess. But Adam Thielen, sit him versus the Cowboys. Julio Jones versus the Colts. Julio is just somebody who continues to be on the disappointment list every single week, and I just don't know if I can deal with it anymore. So if you have better options at wide receiver, sit Julio versus the Colts. The 2 tight ends I want you to sit. Another my bad. Last week I told you to start Gerald Everett, and I thought he was going to do better, but, he just did not do very good on Monday night versus the Saints, and it just was not very good. So sit him this week versus the Jags. Geno Smith just does not look very good. And maybe a deep sleeper defense to start is the Jags, because Geno Smith could easily throw some interceptions, and we saw what the Saints did. They just were feasting on sacks and stuff like that, and they weren't doing so good. Now, the defense that you need to sit this week, I talked about it. Maybe the Giants will go off and maybe they'll have a good game, but don't be crazy and don't go being like, oh, the Giants are going to be the ballers. The Giants are 2007. Don't be going crazy and don't be doing that. Let's just sit the Giants this week unless you're desperate in need of a 2-defense league, and just don't go crazy and sit the Giants because they had a good week last week. You don't want to do that. Just because a guy and a team had one good week doesn't mean they're going to go out and do it again. So now that we talked about the sits, let's talk about the guys that you need to stream this week for the guys that you need to sit, and if you're just missing Lamar and all those guys that are on a bye for those two teams. The two quarterbacks that you need to stream this week, it's Trevor Lawrence versus the Seattle Seahawks. We saw what Jameis Winston did. He didn't have a phenomenal game, but Trevor Lawrence could go out there and prove something on Sunday, and I think he can definitely do that. And the Seahawks looked like they were the 12th man again, but Trevor Lawrence could go out and shut that up. And, honestly, again, if you need a quarterback in 2 quarterback leagues, start Trevor Lawrence. Another guy, I talked about him earlier, Daniel Jones versus the Chiefs. He's somebody only in 2 quarterback leagues I would start him. He is somebody I might have to start in one league because I have Lamar Jackson on a bye week, because I am in a 2 quarterback league, and it's just one of those things. So I might have to start him, and if you have to in a 2 quarterback league, I would definitely start him. Michael Carter, honestly, versus the Bengals is the only guy other than Corey Davis I trust right now on that offense. So if you need a running back, especially if you're missing like Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, or if you have injury galore with all these injuries to running backs, if you need a running back, I would definitely consider streaming Michael Carter versus the Bengals. Brandon Bolden, he went out and had a phenomenal game. He looked like he was I don't know where he came from, but again, if you need a running back this week, I would definitely consider starting Brandon Bolden. The wide receivers, I talked about it, the streams. Alan Lazard of the Green Bay Packers. If Aaron Rodgers is out, if Devonte Adams is out, I would definitely start Alan Lazard on a stream. And like I said, there's a lot of receivers out this week with Rashad Bateman, Hollywood Brown, Henry Ruggs, Braylon Edwards if you're starting them in deeper leagues. But, you might have to start Alan Lazard. Another guy that is a very deep sleeper to stream this week, it's Khalif Raymond of the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have no wins. They don't look like they're going to be good on offense at all, but they get to go up against the Eagles, and the Eagles have shown that they could be really good and really bad. So if you need a wide receiver this week and you're not feeling good, or you're just missing a lot of injuries and you're just freaking out, go pick up Raymond and start him this week for the Lions, because again, Jared Goff needs somebody to throw to. The two tight ends that you need to stream, it's Mac Hollins. I said earlier, I thought it was Mark Hollins. It's Mac Hollins. Mac Hollins, not Collins. Mac Hollins of the Miami Dolphins. A stream of the week for tight ends. We talked about Tua in the sits, and it's not that I don't trust Tua, but I just don't know how many points they're going to be. And if Tua does get some opportunities to throw the ball down the field, Mac Hollins has seemed to be that guy in the end zone to catch a couple touchdowns. And again, with the tight end position so desperate and so bad as it is, Mac Hollins is somebody that you really might need to consider to stream this week. Dalton Schultz, he's coming back off of a bye. He's been doing phenomenal things. And versus the Vikings on Sunday night this upcoming week, I think he's going to have a really good game. So if you need a tight end, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm talking about running back still. If you need a tight end, Dalton Schultz is a start and a stream this week for me in week 8. The stream of the week in the defense, you should be starting this defense anyway. It's the Rams versus the Texans. I was looking at it as I was setting my show up and writing my notes down. I just feel like the Rams have a really good matchup. And, there's a lot of defenses you can start this week. You could start the Bengals. You could start, there's a lot of defenses that you can start this week, to the point where, I didn't know what to do and what team to put, because I don't know. You could start the Eagles defense. There's just a lot of defenses you can start, but the biggest stream of the week is the Rams versus the Texans. And now that we talked about the starts, the sits, and the streams, and I got you ready, and I told you who to put in your lineup and who not to put in your lineup. Let's talk about the games that are going to be straight up fantasy gold, and you need to start everybody in these games. The Patriots versus the Chargers. Mac Jones seems to continue to get better every single week. Justin Herbert and Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler are coming off of their bye. They didn't have a great game before their bye week, and it was just not very good versus the Baltimore Ravens. So they have something to prove, and this game is going to be a barn burner. I promise you that. The second game, it's the Colts and Titans. You need to start everybody, and I'm not saying that the Colts are going to do phenomenal things, and Carson Wentz is going to go up and put 30 points, and all these things. But I think Jonathan Taylor will still do his thing. Ryan Tannehill's going to have a good game. A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry's King Henry going to do his thing. There's just so many guys in this game that you're going to need to start, and I'm hoping that is a higher scoring game and they don't play defense like the Titans seem to play versus the Chiefs, because that's not what we want. We want to see high scoring and fantasy points all around. My biggest fantasy gold game of the week, not the season, the week this week, it's the Packers versus the Cardinals on Thursday Night Football. We see Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Robert Tanyan, hopefully Devonte Adams, Alan Lazard. We see Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Chase Edmonds, James Conner, Zach Ertz, A.J. Green. I could go on and on about that Cardinals offense. We see so many fantasy football players relevant in this game, and hopefully this game is fantasy gold, so you need to make sure you start everybody in these games. Now, before I go, the last thing I always like to do, it's my 3 guarantees for the week. My first guarantee of the week is the Bengals and Rams are going to feast on defense. They are facing the Jets and the Texans representatively, and it's just one of those things. Those two defenses are really, really good, and I think that they're going to continue to do their thing, and it's going to be one of those things that I think that they're both going to be the top scoring defenses this week, and I guarantee you that, because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'll say it next week. But as of now, I guarantee you the Bengals and Rams will be the 2 top defenses of Week 8. Kenneth Gainwell, we talked about him all show. Top waiver wire priority, start of the week, doing his thing. Put him in your lineup, and he's going to be a top 10. He might even be a top 5 running back this week, but I'm going to say I guarantee you he's a top 10 versus that awful Lions run defense. My last guarantee of the week. Everybody's freaking out right now. Aaron Rodgers, he's losing Devonte Adams. Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? It's Thursday night. Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. No matter who he has as wide receiver, he's going to be perfectly fine. So don't do anything stupid like I did a few weeks ago and sit Aaron Rodgers, keep him in your lineup, and feel good going in on Thursday night. I mean, crap, he could throw the ball to me and I'll score a touchdown. All I got to do is try to find a way to get open. Aaron Rodgers will be fine, so don't do anything crazy and just keep Aaron Rodgers in your lineup and feel good going on Thursday night with Aaron as your quarterback. And there you have it, people. We've got through Armageddon. Week 7 is in the books. We got Week 8 coming up. We are almost halfway through. Next week, we'll be halfway through the fantasy football season. I know I've said almost halfway through about 50 times throughout this whole episode, but it's Week 8. We are, again, meat of the fantasy football season. Hopefully, you're doing good. I'm sitting at 5-2, 6-1. And 5-2 in all of my leagues. Hopefully you're doing the same. Hopefully you're doing your thing and you're listening to all of Tino's advice and it's helping you out, and we're winning this together. Because like I say, and I've said it all year this year and last year, I'm here to help you win, take your league, take your friends, take some bragging rights, take some money. Definitely got to take that money from your friends. It's all about fantasy football, and it's just awesome, and hopefully everybody is doing their thing. I hope everybody enjoys Week 8. I hope everybody continues to listen. Remember to smash that subscribe button. Like, follow at TinoTime1996. TinoTime10 on Instagram. Tino's Time Wrestling for all you wrestling freaks and geeks. We got Halloween Havoc going on right now as you listen to this. So go check out Tino's Time Halloween Havoc. pre-show and post-show coming out tomorrow, not tomorrow morning after everything goes down. But for all you, obviously, you fantasy football freaks and geeks out there, hopefully you set your lineups. We do our thing. We got through Mageddon again. Thank God that's over with. I don't want to ever deal with that again. I hope you listen and you enjoy. And until next week, when we recap Week 8, and we are literally halfway through the fantasy football season already, and we preview Week 9, this is your boy Tino, signing out.